Xiai Emei, the green-haired young woman, lowered her head, defeated. Sadness seemed to weigh physically on her shoulders, as small particles of light fell around her, marking a moment of painful silence. In the dim light of that cell, the truth was revealed. While holding her companion's inert body, the prisoner informed the fallen man that the other had chosen to end her own suffering to escape that place. The man in the black coat heard the news without showing any emotion. His gaze remained cold and distant, absorbing the tragedy with calculated indifference, as if death were just a detail. Without offering comfort, he stood up and turned his back. His presence there seemed to have come to an end, and the man stared at the dark portal in front of him, ready to leave without looking back. The woman squeezed her friend's body against her chest, refusing to accept the loss. The weight of death in her arms was the only reality that remained in that desolate environment. The deep pain soon turned into fury. With tears streaming down her face, the survivor shouted at the visitor's back, demanding to know if that tragic outcome was what satisfied him. The scream echoed, making the man stop for a brief moment. He remained still, listening to the desperate accusation, but without deigning to turn his face to offer an answer. She continued to lament the cruel fate that had been imposed on them. The imprisonment had broken them mentally, leading her companion to a final act of despair to escape that prison. Suddenly, the dynamic changed. The man approached with a threatening aura, raising her chin firmly and forcing her to face the merciless coldness in his eyes. Terrified, the young woman recoiled, trying to defend herself from that intimidation. Between sobs, she vehemently denied any guilt, insisting that he was making a terrible mistake and that they were innocent. Completely ignoring the desperate pleas, the man resumed his path. He walked towards the exit, abandoning the prisoner to her own fate in the darkness of that dungeon. The protagonist threw himself into the void without hesitation. His cloak fluttered as he plummeted through the darkness, crossing the dimensional barrier that separated that place from his destiny. The landscape changed drastically from a cold cell to a fiery hell. As he fell through the skies, he found himself facing the colossal jaw of a red beast that dominated the horizon. The scenario was purely apocalyptic. Giant dragons flew among the rubble of a ruined modern city, with fire consuming the buildings in the background. One of the creatures roared, releasing a crackling and savage energy. The man had left a silent tragedy to plunge directly into the heart of a war between monsters. The man in the black coat maintained his composure, reflecting internally on the nature of the change, indifferent to the chaos that surrounded him. Before him, a colossal beast emerged from the shadows, announcing its presence with a roar that would make any ordinary warrior recoil. The creature did not hesitate and released a devastating torrent of flames, trying to incinerate the intruder who dared to invade its territory. However, the young man only watched the attack approach. His gaze showed no fear, only a cold assessment of the imminent threat. The impact was violent, consuming the scene in a fiery explosion that seemed to leave no chance of survival for anyone. But in the midst of the destruction, a crackling energy emerged. He focused his power in the palm of his hand, ready to respond in kind. With a precise movement, an energy blade cut through the flames and the beast itself, splitting the attack in half. The man in the black coat landed gracefully, enveloped in an aura of power that warded off the infernal heat around him. He didn't stop there. A rain of slashing blows descended on the area, shredding everything in its path with supernatural speed. The young man continued his dizzying descent, diving headfirst even deeper into the abyss full of dangers. The pit was infested. A horde of dragons and grotesque creatures awaited in the depths, hungry and furious. Wielding his energy blade, he prepared for the confrontation. The expression on his face remained unchanged in the face of the crowd of enemies. The first monster that tried to attack him was immediately sliced into pieces before it even understood what hit it. Another beast advanced, roaring in blind fury, but its fate was already sealed before that overwhelming power. It was a one-sided slaughter. The beasts fell one after another, dismembered by the surgical precision of his relentless attacks. The man in the black coat cut through the opposition with lethal precision. His energy blade pierced the enemy before any reaction was possible. He stood among the smoldering ruins, watching the devastation around him. The apocalyptic scenario momentarily silenced under his watchful gaze. Suddenly, the warrior's expression changed. His eyes narrowed as he realized that the flow of time and reality was about to restart. In the sky, a blinding light drew the attention of all the beasts. Dragons and monsters flew towards that luminous rift, as if called by something greater. In another reality, a vortex of purple energy suddenly manifested in the middle of a modern city. The portal pulsed with a threatening and unknown aura. The civilians, oblivious to the real danger, stopped to observe the phenomenon. A young man, treating it as entertainment, posed casually in front of the anomaly. Curiosity soon turned into horror. Grotesque monsters emerged from the dimensional abyss, appearing right behind the boy who was ignoring imminent death. Panic spread instantly through the crowd. A woman froze in fear as she realized that peaceful everyday life had been brutally interrupted. The massacre began without warning. Nightmarish creatures descended on the defenseless population, turning the 21st century into a bloody hunting ground. That event marked the end of the old story. Humanity was forced to enter a new era of survival, christened the New Genesis. XML, the world physically transformed. Floating islands and distorted landscapes came to occupy the skies, protected by energy barriers. Sometime later, society tried to rebuild. Students walked towards an imposing technological structure, the center of the new academy city. However, violence still persisted in the alleys. A man with a mutated arm assaulted a defenseless woman, using his strength to cruelly intimidate her. The assault was interrupted by a security force. Armed agents surrounded the criminal, ordering him to deactivate his ability and surrender immediately. Amidst the tension, firm footsteps echoed on the ground. Someone in authority calmly approached the conflict, without showing any haste. The criminal, feeling cornered, kept the hostage under the threat of his blade. He knew the situation had spiraled out of control. Panic was evident on his sweaty and distorted face. The fear of being captured made him even more dangerous and unpredictable. Before him, the police officer remained impassive. The young man watched the opponent's despair with a cold and calculating gaze. Suddenly, the aggressor violently pushed the woman aside. He decided to abandon his human shield to go on a full offensive. The man attacked ferociously, swinging his deadly weapon. However, the police officer dodged the rapid blows with impressive agility. The officer moved with pinpoint precision. He seemed bored, dodging the deadly blade as if it were just a minor annoyance. Taking advantage of the gap in the enemy's guard, the young man prepared his counterattack. He channeled strength into a single direct punch. The fist collided brutally against the criminal's face. The force of the impact was overwhelming, cutting off any chance of reaction. The aggressor was thrown backwards violently. He slid across the ground, kicking up dust and debris with the force of the fall. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The man with the mutated arm lay unconscious and defeated in the rubble. The police officer from the Guarida Metropolitan Station remained standing. He simply adjusted his clothes without showing any sign of physical exertion. Later, inside the police station, the atmosphere was calm. The place seemed like a haven of order amidst the chaos of the outside world. A monitor displayed the news about the recent incident. The report detailed how the criminal had been pursued and taken a civilian hostage. The image on the screen showed the aggressor neutralized on the ground. The media highlighted the efficiency of the police action in containing the public threat. The young officer watched the report with indifference. His tired eyes suggested that this type of violence was just routine for him. The officer seemed anxious about the incident report, sweat running down her face as she tried to process what had just happened. The young police officer, however, maintained his stoic expression, treating the violent confrontation as a bureaucratic triviality. She hesitated for a moment, averting her gaze. There was something about his indifferent attitude that made her uncomfortable, or perhaps she was just seeking the courage to confront him about his behavior. her frustration finally exploded. While the officer effortlessly restrained the criminal, she reprimanded him for his lack of cooperation, questioning whether he was just showing off instead of helping the team as he should. He paid no attention to the complaints. Coldly, he took responsibility for taking the prisoner alone and dismissed his colleague so that she could take care of her own tasks. Intimidated, she just agreed. That world, however, hid ancient secrets. The real story wasn't about urban crimes, but about creatures from another dimension, and the protective instinct they had with their offspring. The conflict that plagued reality had a specific and tragic beginning. It all started with the premature death of the dragon hatchlings, an event that triggered catastrophic consequences. In the world of Ascalifa, creatures that reached a certain stage of maturity needed to migrate. Earth became the chosen destination for this dimensional passage. The process, however, was brutal. Driven mad by war and unstable energy, some of these beings completely lost control, succumbing to madness even before completing the crossing. It was a cycle of tragedy. Even among those of their own kind, madness took a heavy toll, leaving behind lifeless bodies and companions lamenting the loss of their peers' sanity. Those who survived the madness but lost their reason turned their fury against humanity. They descended from the skies not as visitors, but as beasts hungry for destruction. The invasion became total. The planet was surrounded by dragons and monsters, plunging human civilization into a desperate war against predators from the stars. At the center of this apocalypse, a man fought repeatedly. He was a regressor who had lived that life countless times, becoming so powerful that he reached the absolute limit of his growth. The regressor realized that brute force was no longer enough. To break the endless cycle of destruction, he decided he needed to adopt a completely new approach. Back in the present, he dragged the defeated criminal as if he were trash, ignoring the weight of the past. His colleague, however, tried to catch up with him, changing the tone of the conversation to something more casual. With a playful smile, she adjusted her glasses and tried to break the ice. Ignoring his coldness, she suggested they go eat something together, seeking any breach in the armor of that mysterious man. The police officer ignored his colleague's confusion and continued on his way. When asked where he was going, he didn't hesitate to turn his back. His answer was short and definitive: Europe. It was a necessary journey to find something, or someone, he had left behind. Immediately, the regressor's mind was flooded with memories. He visualized the smiling face of a child, crowned with flowers, a fragment of an innocent past. He remembered a simpler time, where games and laughter filled the sunny days, far from the darkness he now knew. In those memories, one figure stood out. The woman had always been there, caring for them with kindness, a constant amidst that ephemeral peace. And however, upon returning to the present, reality set in. The protagonist knew that the time for nostalgia was over and that he needed to act. He finally located her in a quiet garden. The reunion was marked by a simple greeting from her, contrasting with his tension. The green-haired girl stopped, observing the newcomer. There was a silent curiosity in her gaze, trying to understand the man's presence. She seemed harmless, with a gentle expression. The same purity that he remembered from their past lives still emanated from her presence. But the man had no time to waste on sentimentality. He went straight to the point, declaring that he needed her to come with him immediately. Silence momentarily returned to the garden after the demand. Both remained still, assessing each other's posture and intentions. The woman, however, did not give in immediately. She questioned the exact reason for this search, wanting to understand the motive behind the direct approach. He claimed to have pending matters specifically with her. It was at that moment that the energy around the young woman began to vibrate differently. Magic circles appeared in the air, illuminating the environment with complex runes. She realized that the visitor knew exactly who and what she was. Surrounded by arcane power, the young woman smiled, abandoning any pretense. The facade of normalcy fell, and she accepted the start of this interaction. The officer maintained his firm posture, carefully observing the young woman's reaction in front of him. With a penetrating gaze, he sought any sign of recognition or duplicity in her expression. The young woman, however, just turned casually, confirming that she was paying attention. Determined to test her, the regressor spoke his own name aloud, awaiting a response. To his surprise, the green-haired girl reacted with a radiant and disarming smile. The atmosphere instantly became heavy when he questioned in a threatening tone whether that name sounded familiar to her. The tension dissipated when she pragmatically indicated that his name was visible on his uniform. Laughing at the situation, she confessed that she was just kidding, trying to break his seriousness. However, her tone changed subtly as she admitted that she perceived the overwhelming power emanating from him. Yu Jitae narrowed his eyes. Her perception was sharp, far beyond what her innocent appearance suggested. He remained silent, processing the information while she continued to speak. With unexpected boldness, the young woman directly asked if his intention there was to kill her. She awaited the answer with genuine curiosity, without showing any trace of real fear. Ignoring the dramatic provocation, the officer simply walked past her, refusing to play along. He continued his walk through the garden, leaving the girl behind as he pursued his own goal. It was said in ancient legends that the Green Dragon clan possessed an unparalleled gift, the ability to see their own providence. The young woman carried this ancestral heritage in her gaze, understanding truths that escaped others. The officer approached her, his imposing presence creating a palpable tension in the air as he awaited a response. To his surprise, the girl reacted with a genuine smile, showing satisfaction with what she had just heard. They reached an agreement. As the man resumed his path, she followed him closely, readily accepting the direction he proposed. Her steps were light and determined, showing no hesitation in accompanying this strange visitor. However, before proceeding, she stopped and made a playful demand, indicating that the pact needed an extra guarantee. She extended her pinky finger, insisting on sealing the commitment with a gesture of childish but absolute promise. The man watched her seriously, resigned to this unexpected condition for such an important alliance. He yielded to her whim. Their fingers intertwined, making a silent oath that united their destinies from that moment on. Sometime later, the bucolic scenery gave way to the cold reality of the modern city's concrete towers. In a domestic setting, the girl peeked through the crack in the door with the stunned expression of someone who had just woken up. She walked through the apartment with sleepy steps, completely unarmed and vulnerable in her daily routine. Suddenly, her attention was captured by something in the living room. A dark energy began to manifest in the air. The officer remained seated with total calm, while a creature made of shadows rose behind him, awaiting his orders. Cabaret examles. The shadowy entity bowed before his will. Swearing absolute obedience to its master, the darkness accepted the protagonist's command before dissipating. The man in the black coat turned his back on the supernatural and walked through the apartment. The green-haired young woman just watched, still processing the power she had just witnessed. She looked for some reaction on his face, but found only coldness. As the protagonist passed, the girl seemed full of questions that she didn't dare ask immediately. Suddenly, the young woman noticed something in the air. She sniffed subtly, noticing a change in the atmosphere, or perhaps a trace of energy coming from him. While the man tried to read the newspaper in the living room, the girl broke the silence. She questioned his work methods, suggesting that her own cloning abilities might be useful. Realizing that she was talking to herself, she smiled sheepishly and scratched her head. The protagonist remained impassive, completely ignoring her attempt to appear helpful. Without being shaken by his indifference, the young woman decided to approach. She sat on the sofa next to him, grabbing a pillow to feel more comfortable. She snuggled into the upholstery, subtly invading his personal space. The man continued to focus on his reading, tolerating her presence there, even though the proximity was evident. Her eyes fixed on him over the pillow. With an almost childlike curiosity, the green-haired young woman began to study every movement of her silent companion. The protagonist felt the weight of that insistent gaze. Fatigue was visible in his profile, but he maintained his composure, refusing to react to her constant observation. The dynamic changed when she commented about feeling suddenly invigorated. The man finally lowered the newspaper, noting that the girl did indeed look healthier and more animated. Full of a new energy, the young woman leaned forward with agility. The fragility she had previously shown had disappeared, giving way to a more active posture. A confident and mischievous smile appeared on her face. Her vitality had completely returned, and she seemed ready for anything, demonstrating a sudden self-confidence. Later, the narrative shifted to the city center. The pair's destination was a large supermarket, a mundane setting for such peculiar figures. Their presence immediately caught the attention of civilians. People began to point and whisper, mistaking the young woman's stunning appearance for that of a famous celebrity. The market customers couldn't contain their malicious comments. They whispered openly, comparing the policeman's appearance to something unpleasant in contrast to the young woman. The man ignored the offenses and moved on, while fate punished the gossips with a sudden tumble. The green-haired young woman, oblivious to the confusion, just hummed contentedly. Her curiosity was insatiable in the face of this new world. Excited, she tried to draw his attention to something she saw on the street, seeking interaction. However, the policeman didn't slow down to wait for her. Realizing that she was being left behind, the girl had to run hastily to catch up with him. The man sighed, showing weariness with the situation. The young woman, not understanding that cold attitude, questioned the reason for such exhaustion. His lack of patience, however, seemed to amuse her. She laughed softly, finding that grumpy behavior funny. The walk continued along the city sidewalk. The policeman carried the weight of the bulky purchases, while she accompanied him with light and carefree steps. Suddenly, her expression changed. Something unexpected or a sudden doubt made her stop, showing clear confusion. They were being watched. A sinister figure, equipped with a cybernetic eye implant, fixed his gaze on the girl with a disturbing and predatory interest. Later, they sought to regularize her situation in an administrative office. Under the policeman's serious supervision, the young woman interacted with the local technology to register. The bureaucratic process was completed quickly. The attendant handed over the documents, finalizing the service under the man's watchful eye. There were, however, more needs to be met. A display case exhibited technological devices essential for life in that modern society. The policeman approached to ensure that everything was set up correctly. He watched as the young woman, fascinated, learned to navigate the holographic interface. Now it was official. She held her resident registration card, which confirmed her name as Yu and her address in Earth's special city. As they left at dusk, the young woman admired her new identity. The policeman, however, reflected on what was still missing. She didn't have a bank account or a holographic watch. The young woman caught her companion's attention, seeming to want to break the silence between them. The man stopped to listen, although his expression showed little patience in the face of the commercial announcement in the background. As they walked, Yoa held her new registration with a genuine smile, contrasting with his usual coldness. Surrounded by the flowers of the season, she reflected aloud on how spring represented the arrival of life into the world. However, behind that smile, she openly confessed that his presence still caused her fear. Her instincts remained on high alert, visualizing the dark and threatening aura that he carried. For her, it was undeniable that this man represented a latent and absolute danger. Even aware of this threat, she maintained the lightness in her expression, which caught his eye. The protagonist stared at her in silence, processing the brutal honesty hidden in those gentle words. They continued their journey through the park, while she internally reaffirmed the accuracy of her own intuition. Getsu, faced with that analysis, the man stopped and seemed to consider the situation with a new perspective. Yoa's curiosity overcame her apprehension, and she decided that she would continue to observe him closely to understand who he was. He resumed walking indifferently, while the girl followed him, now with a renewed and playful interest. Suddenly, the protagonist stopped and raised his face, noticing the petals dancing in the wind. For a brief moment, He closed his eyes, allowing himself to absorb the rare tranquility of that moment. Yujitai ended his train of thought. The image of the bright petals still lingered in his mind as the narrative changed scenes. Far away, under the moonlight of a deserted moor in the African continent, the calmness of the night hid a latent tension. A red-haired warrior cornered her opponent. The man, visibly terrified, realized too late the disparity in power between them. Her answer came in the form of brute violence. A direct kick hit the man's face, crushing any attempt at negotiation. She laughed as she continued the attack. The woman moved with lethal agility, enjoying the ease of combat. The opponent collapsed against the rocks, groaning in pain. He tried to plead, but he was already completely defeated and at her mercy. The fighter adjusted her mask, satisfied. She counted one more victory for her perfect record, questioning if there would be any real challenge. Upon lifting her mask, she revealed a predatory smile. Her eyes sparkled with malice as she pondered who her next prey would be. Meanwhile, news about the devastation in Africa was spreading. Headlines about destroyed cities and battlefields dominated the network. The mouse cursor clicked on a specific report. The focus of the research was a notorious vigilante, known in those lands as the Huntress. Yujite was sitting in his office, absorbing the information. He read the reports with a serious and analytical expression. His concentration was interrupted by a call. He looked away from the monitor, promptly responding to the request coming from another room. What awaited him was a meal of dubious appearance. Whole fish were stuck in purple rice, emanating a sinister aura. Jite stared at the plate with a blank look. He seemed to silently assess the risk of ingesting that bizarre culinary combination. The green-haired girl, however, smiled radiantly. She offered the spoon with pride, eagerly hoping he would taste her creation. The served dish seemed to cry out for mercy. That grotesque combination of whole fish and purple rice defied any acceptable culinary logic. Yujite lowered his eyes, staring at the food with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. He needed courage just to consider taking the first bite. Silence hung over the dining table. As smoke rose from the bizarre dish, he hesitated, holding the cutlery, unsure of where to start. The green-haired girl, however, waited with an expression of pure innocence. She seemed oblivious to the gastronomic horror she had just presented. Jite sighed, shifting his focus from the food to the real problem. He began to ponder the best way to approach the situation and convince his target. The protagonist crossed his arms, deciding to explain the complexity of the scenario. It wouldn't be as simple as just showing up and solving everything. He began to dismantle the fish manually, ignoring etiquette. The texture of that meal seemed as problematic as the mission they were discussing. The girl listened attentively as he spoke. Jite emphasized that the Red Dragon race possessed a very specific and dangerous nature. He described how those creatures idolized war and violence. Trying to use brute force to bring her back would be a fatal mistake against such proud beings. Jite brought his hand to his chin, analyzing the odds. He knew that the method of approach would need to be different to avoid a disaster. The image of a solitary sword stuck in the ground illustrated the likely fate. If they continued at that pace, the result would only be more conflict and death. Yujitai's gaze became sharp and calculating. He was visualizing the consequences of each step they could take from there. The conversation was interrupted by her curiosity about his silence. Jite admitted that he found it interesting to see her react that way. He watched her seriously, studying the girl's intentions. Her concerns seemed genuine, contrasting with the coldness of the tactical discussion. The young woman smiled warmly and sincerely. She readily agreed, making it clear that she also wanted to protect the Red Warrior from a fatal destiny. The green-haired girl smiled with an air of triumph. She had noticed a subtle detail in his behavior and did not hesitate to point it out. Yujite's gaze fell on the stew that emanated a strange aura. The girl confronted him, noting that he had dropped the spoon during the conversation. He closed his eyes and sighed, resigned. Yujitai realized that there would be no way to escape that situation without finishing the meal. Meanwhile, in a desolate setting, the reality was brutal. A uniformed man lay on the ground, defeated and panting. The rest of the squad was in the same deplorable situation. The silence of defeat hung over the hooded soldiers awaiting their fate. Back at the apartment, Yujite resumed his meal under the girl's watchful gaze. He kept eating, ignoring the dish's bizarre appearance to please her. Far away, the red-haired warrior remained standing among the fallen bodies. She had completely dominated the battlefield, without a scratch. The groans of pain from one of the survivors echoed across the barren land. The brute force used against them had been overwhelming. The woman walked among the defeated, visibly bored. There was no one left on that continent capable of challenging her, and her mind wandered to new destinations. She wondered aloud about paying a visit to someone from the past. To the soldiers listening, that casual digression in the middle of the massacre seemed like pure madness. The remaining men tried to stay invisible. Paralyzing fear prevented them from making any sudden movements while she spoke to herself. Terror was etched on the soldier's face. He knew that any sound or whisper could attract the predator's attention again. But her hearing was sharp. With a sadistic smile, the warrior leaped back towards those who dared to murmur. The soldier tried to raise his weapon in a desperate act of defense. However, the panic and the enemy's speed made any reaction useless. The blow came quickly and mercilessly. She brandished her weapon with terrifying enthusiasm, ending the discussion violently. The warrior didn't hesitate in the heat of battle. The impact of her blows resonated, marking the start of a visceral confrontation. With a sweeping motion, she unleashed a wave of devastating energy, sweeping away everything in front of her with brute force. The pressure of the attack was so great that her own mask began to give way, but she gritted her teeth and forced the blow. The tension was palpable as she tightened her grip on the weapon, refusing to back down an inch in the face of resistance. With a shout of effort, the young woman delivered the final blow, putting all her weight into the downward attack to break the defense. The enemy soldiers retreated in panic. They realized, too late, that their mana protection had been instantly cut off. As she finished dealing with the infantry, however, an imposing figure in heavy armor watched the scene silently. This was Javier Karma, 8th in the ranking of superhumans. His mere presence emanated an aura of overwhelming power and intense heat. Under the dark hood, a penetrating gaze analyzed every movement of the girl, coldly assessing the level of threat she posed. Victorious against the lesser soldiers, the fighter turned to face the new opponent, displaying a smile full of confidence and defiance. She provoked the newcomer naturally, questioning his intentions while resting her sword on his shoulder, showing no fear of his ranking. Javier revealed his face, maintaining a serious and visibly irritated expression in the face of that opponent's audacity and words. The provocation, however, was just a prelude. Her smile widened, revealing a genuine thirst for a more difficult battle. Energy began to crackle around her body again. She prepared her stance, making it clear that the conversation was over. In the blink of an eye, the warrior advanced with explosive speed, initiating the direct attack against the armored giant. The red-haired warrior didn't hesitate, launching a direct attack against the armored knight. However, her blade met an impenetrable defense. The opponent retaliated instantly, unleashing a blast of energy that forced her to retreat. The pressure of that aura was overwhelming and dangerous. She widened her eyes, realizing that his brute strength exceeded all expectations. The danger was much greater than she had calculated. The knight's fist glowed with an ominous light as he prepared his next move. He seemed to silently question the futility of her efforts. Even at a disadvantage, the young woman maintained her defiant stance as she moved. She taunted the enemy, confident that her combat experience was still worth something. Under the dark hood, a single bright eye followed her every step. He offered no verbal response, just a predatory and lethal presence. The gloved hand gripped the sword hilt with crushing force. The air grew heavy, signaling that the real battle was about to begin. He leaped with terrifying speed, bringing the golden blade down on her. The warrior looked up, paralyzed by the magnitude of the impending blow. The impact was inevitable, and she realized her fatal mistake. Panic took over as she understood that there would be no way to dodge that devastation. The sword struck the ground, releasing a pillar of light that tore through the earth. Destruction engulfed everything around in a blinding explosion of energy. The shockwave hurled the girl violently against the rubble. Her body collided with the wall, feeling the brutal weight of that attack. The dust settled, revealing the imposing knight in the center of the crater. He remained motionless, standing as an unshakable force of nature. Suddenly, something caught his attention. The knight turned his head, noticing a subtle change in the destroyed environment. Hidden behind a broken wall, the warrior was surprised by someone who restrained her. The newcomer desperately signaled for absolute silence. Outraged, the redhead tried to question the unexpected presence of that girl there. The green-haired young woman, however, just smiled and asked for calm in the face of imminent danger. The green-haired girl scolded the warrior while treating her wounds, pointing out her current inability to fight. Offended by the remark, the redhead immediately retorted, refusing to accept her vulnerability. She stubbornly insisted that the fight would only end in death, ignoring the imminent danger. Ignoring the bravado, the healer focused her magic to close the wounds on her companion's arm. With a calm smile, she proposed a cooperation, revealing that her true goal was to remain on Earth. The unexpected offer of alliance left the warrior momentarily speechless, processing the information. The healer, however, warned the time was short, as the enemy was too powerful to be avoided. Noticing a sudden approach, the warrior questioned if that was the ally the other was talking about. The green-haired girl maintained her serene and enigmatic expression, awaiting the imminent arrival. An imposing figure, covered in dark armor, emerged from the rubble emanating danger. The newcomer observed the two with a cold and penetrating gaze through the darkness of his helmet. The oppressive pressure lessened as the protagonist revealed his face, noting the presence of an unexpected companion. A blonde girl appeared, sniffing the air, confused by the nature of the local energy, which left the young man perplexed. Faced with the strange apparition in the middle of the battlefield, he demanded to know who she was. The girl responded only with a radiant and mysterious smile, seeming amused by the situation. The man in the black coat stopped abruptly. Something in what was said captured his immediate attention, interrupting his thoughts. The word companion sounded strange to him. The young man repeated the term, genuinely confused by the association they just made. He looked at the armored figure in front of him. The idea of being considered an accomplice or partner of someone in that situation seemed absurd. Meanwhile, the green-haired girl protected the wounded warrior. The redhead, still weak, questioned if that was the mysterious man they spoke of. The hooded figure reacted with a visible start. The newcomer's casual attitude seemed to have provoked an immediate irritation in the knight. Ignoring the tension, the protagonist calmly walked towards the opponent. He coldly argued that the accused woman had in fact not killed anyone. The logical defense only enraged the knight. In a threatening voice, the entity warned that it would not tolerate games or disrespect to its authority. The young man's gaze hardened with impatience. He realized that diplomacy had failed, and that dealing with that obstacle would be inevitable. The armor's gloves creaked as they tightened on the sword's hilt. A lethal energy began to emanate from the blade, ready to be released. Identifying himself as an investigator, the warrior attacked without hesitation. He declared that he would arrest both the woman and the one who claimed to be her partner. The armor's power was activated with a command shout. The offensive magic reached its peak, preparing to incinerate the target. The investigator brought down his blade with devastating force. The blow had the clear intention of crushing any defense in a single movement. An explosion of energy swept through the impact site. The earth shook violently under the brute force of the released attack. The dust began to settle around the smoking crater. The knight remained on guard, observing the result of his destructive offensive. However, his eyes gleamed with suspicion under the hood. He realized that, despite the destruction caused, the battle was far from over. The man in the black coat sighed, the frustration evident in his posture. This confrontation was becoming a waste of time for him. However, his eyes narrowed as he noticed the change in the atmosphere. He noted that the opponent was about to risk everything. The armored warrior, with his eyes gleaming with contained fury, prepared to unleash all his power in its single desperate attack. He charged with a roar, invoking the name of his deity as the sword shone with a blinding light, aiming to end the combat. The impact was violent, but the protagonist's voice cut through the chaos. He coldly declared that this would be the unluckiest day in his attacker's life. Dark energy swirled around the young man's feet as he landed with elegance and absolute control, without suffering a scratch. He appeared behind the enemy in an instant. The knight, now on his knees and subdued, was forced to listen to the sentence of his imminent defeat. The victor's gaze remained empty and merciless, observing the result of his overwhelming superiority with total indifference. The battle was decided. While the warrior remained subdued, the man in the black coat maintained his position, completely dominating the scene. Terror distorted the armored man's face as he understood the extent of his punishment. He realized too late the brutal physical cost of that confrontation. Examel, the energy blade, descended mercilessly, and the knight's scream echoed, mixing physical pain and the absolute horror of being maimed. Blood stained the ground, marking the moment when fear became the only permanent reality for the defeated. With his opponent blinded and destroyed at his feet, the protagonist remained impassive, the dark aura still dancing around him as an extension of his will. He looked away, ignoring the fallen enemy. His attention was already turning to the horizon, uninterested in the remains of the battle. The brutal scene did not go unnoticed. Two newcomers watched, paralyzed by shock and confusion at the devastating power they witnessed. The red-haired woman watched the scene, stunned. The display of power before her had been terrifying and undeniable. The man in the black coat addressed them coldly. He imposed strict conditions on how they would live from that moment on. As he walked away, the protagonist offered support if they needed it. His posture, however, remained distant and authoritarian. A shadow covered his face momentarily. There was an intensity in his gaze that warned against any disobedience. Suddenly, the tension was broken by a sudden hug. The green-haired girl grabbed her companion, completely surprising her with the gesture. Unlike her tense friend, the girl seemed carefree. She displayed a playful smile, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. The man in the black coat stopped for a moment. The unexpected behavior of the two caught his silent attention. He resumed his walk, leaving the two behind. The mention of a name, however, caused strangeness in the red-haired woman. The protagonist looked back one last time. He needed to ensure his striking presence was not forgotten. Focusing on his mission, he activated a long-distance communication. It was time to report that the situation in the city was resolved. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Amazon rainforest, the scene changed drastically. Another individual awaited news amidst nature. The man in the forest received the mental transmission. He listened attentively to the report sent by the protagonist about the success of the operation. Back in the ruins, the green-haired girl said goodbye formally. She bowed respectfully to the Lord before withdrawing. In the jungle, a blonde girl approached her seated companion. She noticed that he had just communicated with someone unseen. Crouching before him, the girl mocked the situation. She pointed to his equipment, questioning whether he preferred to talk to himself. A vibrant image appeared on the projected screen. The idol winked with a rehearsed charm, instantly capturing the attention of her audience with that calculated gesture. She dominated the stage, illuminated by neon lights. The crowd below roared in absolute adoration, waving their light sticks in perfect sync with the performance. However, behind the spectacle lay a dark truth. Among the ruins of a devastated setting, a solitary figure knelt amidst destruction and suffering. The situation resembled a rose blooming in the darkness. Beautiful and seductive, it drew the eye, promising sweetness and perfection amidst the void. But such glamour came at a cruel price. Sharp thorns hid beneath the petals, reminding that this beauty came with hidden dangers and disadvantages. Meanwhile, in the jungle, Yoa watched the holographic projection with genuine delight. The protagonist, however, remained stoic. focused only on the data before him and ignoring the distraction. The girl twirled happily, swinging the device in the air as if dancing. She seemed completely oblivious to the dangers around her, lost in her own momentary fun. Suddenly, she interrupted her movements. Her expression changed from joy to surprise. When her companion's words cut short her moment of relaxation, the man coldly reprimanded her, sitting on the rock. He made it clear that this hostile environment, full of beasts and insects, was no place for those seeking human entertainment. Yua reacted with exaggerated drama, gesturing frantically in protest against his harshness. The protagonist, however, remained still, completely ignoring the young woman's tantrum beside him. His expression remained unchanged and serious. The man seemed exhausted by that interaction, keeping his focus on the dangerous reality that surrounded them. The blonde appeared behind him with an expression of comical and indignant shock. The protagonist, with deep dark circles under his eyes, just sighed, visibly tired of that chaotic and incessant energy. Realizing that the joke was over, Yoa's attitude changed drastically. She put her fingers together shyly, showing embarrassment and hesitation in the face of her companion's coldness. Then, the young woman revealed the dark truth that afflicted her. She confessed that threatening and obscure figures were still chasing her, persistent shadows that continued on her trail. Sitting on the forest floor, she smiled nervously after the outburst, awaiting a response. The man in the black coat remained in absolute silence, with his back turned, absorbing the gravity of those words. Yoa's expression changed suddenly, going from apprehension to pure curiosity at his attitude. The man raised his hand and, with a precise movement, activated his ability to manipulate space. He accessed a sub-dimension in the void and retrieved a package, leaving the girl stunned by that display of casual power. Yoa's eyes shone intensely, fixed on the object that materialized, completely mesmerized. To her utter disbelief and joy, the revealed treasure was a bag full of fresh breads and pastries that seemed to glow. Incredulous, she questioned if it was really for her. The protagonist simply confirmed, handing over the package indifferently. The girl went into ecstasy, recognizing her favorite treats, treating the simple food like a precious relic. The man in the black coat watched her with a weary look, perhaps judging her exaggerated reaction to something so trivial. Without wasting time, Yoa began to eat voraciously, stuffing her cheeks like a small, hungry animal as he watched. She savored the moment of pleasure, licking her lips and momentarily forgetting the dangers that surrounded her. However, the tranquility was broken. The protagonist turned his face sharply, his instincts picking up something in the environment. Yoa froze immediately, noticing the change in his posture and the tension returning to the air. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a modern metropolis, where skyscrapers rose under a clear blue sky. On a high balcony, a red-haired woman watched the city, leaning against the railing with a relaxed posture. With a cigarette between her lips and a sharp look, she seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. A dark and imposing image arose in his mind, evoking the memory of an ancient power. The protagonist widened his eyes, momentarily paralyzed by that sudden perception or invasive memory. The figure of a woman, with a confident and provocative smile, also manifested in his thoughts. Meanwhile, in a quiet place, a young woman watched the city skyline from the balcony. Suddenly, the green-haired woman noticed a movement at the entrance and turned around curious. Her eyes widened in immediate shock as she recognized who had just arrived. The man in the black coat entered the apartment, accompanied by Yoa, who carried her precious supplies. Oblivious to any tension, the blonde girl continued to devour her sweets with total dedication. However, Yoa suddenly stopped, her cheeks still full, caught by surprise by the unexpected encounter. The shock was so great that in her imagination, happiness seemed to sprout wings and fly away. A momentary silence hung in the room as the hostess and the visitor processed each other's presence. Yoa's expression of astonishment quickly turned into pure euphoria and recognition. The green-haired young woman also did not contain her emotion, opening a warm and welcoming smile. Without hesitation, she pulled the little blonde into a tight hug, praising her friend's beauty with affection. The atmosphere filled with joy with the enthusiastic reunion of the two, while the protagonist watched the scene in silence. The protagonist briefly dismissed his shadow subordinate, recognizing that the work had been well executed before turning his attention back to the surroundings. The balcony door suddenly opened, revealing the red-haired woman who seemed to have just interrupted her workout. The man in the black coat remained impassive, holding the shopping bag while noting the new presence in the place. The newcomer stared at him with a sharp and suspicious look, still catching her breath and assessing the situation. Yoa, however, ignored any tension and waved with explosive enthusiasm upon recognizing her friend, shouting to get her attention. The noisy reception from the two girls, however, only served to irritate the redhead, who found herself surrounded by incessant chatter. With no patience for the racket, she acted practically and stuffed a piece of bread into Yoa's mouth to silence her by force. The redhead exploded in frustration, scolding the lack of manners, while Yoa chewed the bread, stunned by the abrupt reaction. With order re-established, the group gathered in the living room. The protagonist sat before them and began a direct questionnaire about their ages. The green-haired young woman and Yoa maintained a cooperative posture, smiling openly as they awaited the unfolding of the conversation. The red-haired woman, on the other hand, showed complete disinterest, resting her face on her hand as if that interaction was utter boredom. Yoa took advantage of the moment to provoke the companion next to her, puffing out her chest with pride and generating more discomfort in the redhead. The green-haired hostess, in turn, only watched the chaotic dynamic between the friends with a shy and gentle smile. The attention of the two girls soon turned to the man in front, curious about the reason for those sudden questions. The protagonist stared at the trio with his usual serious look, analyzing their answers and behavior in that domestic environment. Upon hearing the name Serageul, Yoa froze. The revelation caught her completely off guard. The necklace she wore began to glow intensely, reacting to the presence of that familiar energy. The protagonist, however, remained impassive. He watched their reaction with a cold, analytical gaze. Taking advantage of the group being together, he decided to impose his conditions. It was necessary to establish clear rules for living together. The girls stared at him, confused by the sudden change in tone. The question of his intentions hung in the air. The red-haired woman showed immediate irritation. This conversation seemed to be testing her patience. The three remained on the sofa, processing the demands. The atmosphere in the room fluctuated between surprise and discomfort. However, the tension soon gave way to understanding. The redhead realized that the proposal involved them all living together. The green-haired girl jumped up. The idea seemed to have greatly pleased the hostess. The excitement was instant and contagious. Yoa vibrated with the possibility, while the redhead laughed at the situation. Without wasting time, the hostess pulled out her wallet. She was willing to finance anything to make it work. With a radiant smile, she offered the resources to the protagonist. Money would not be a problem for her. The man in the black coat turned his back, silently accepting the offer. He had what he needed to proceed. The result was an extravagant shopping spree. The three went through the stores, enjoying the moment of leisure without restrictions. Meanwhile, the protagonist's wrist device kept vibrating. The bank's spending notifications accumulated until they reached the credit limit. The girls returned from shopping and began unpacking with enthusiasm. While the blonde decided which clothes to try on first, the redhead seemed to have prioritized weaponry. The protagonist just watched the chaotic scene from the sofa. He checked the card, feeling the weight of the recent expenses. His expression betrayed the weariness of having to deal with his companion's financial impulsiveness. Turning to the green-haired girl with the receipt in hand, he sought an explanation. She just smiled nervously, trying to soften the situation with innocence. The protagonist's gaze darkened in silence. The mental exhaustion of managing that group was becoming evident on his face. Meanwhile, the blonde was turning the room into her personal catwalk. she proudly displayed each new piece of clothing, changing styles in the blink of an eye. She showed no remorse for the volume of purchases. For her, the beauty of the pieces completely justified the excessive spending. The redhead, on the other hand, had very different priorities. Her expression changed, becoming serious and focused, far from the frivolity of clothes. She wielded the newly acquired sword, eager to test its balance. The protagonist listened, impassively, to her demand to continue combat, testing right there in the room. Noticing his lack of reaction, she scratched her head, suddenly embarrassed. Perhaps brandishing a blade inside an apartment was not the most normal attitude. Still, she tried to argue about the decent quality of the weapon. The group formed a bizarre picture, mixing domesticity with latent danger. The accumulated energy soon exploded into childish games. The two ran through the apartment, mixing shopping bags with arm chases. The green-haired girl watched everything radiantly. For her, that noisy mess was a cause for joy, contrasting with the stoicism of the man beside her. However, something subtle diverted the protagonist's attention from that confusion. His eyes fixed on a specific detail that stood out from the environment. On the kitchen counter, there was a solitary and silent object. It seemed completely out of place amid so many clothes and weapons. It was just a small plant sprouting in a pot. Someone, amidst the unbridled consumerism, had decided to bring a simple touch of life to the place. The protagonist remained sitting on the sofa, immersed in silence, when he was approached. The green-haired girl approached, seeking to understand the intentions behind his words. She carefully placed a vase on the table. The small plant represented something fragile and precious that she wanted to preserve amidst that chaotic reality. A genuine smile appeared on her face as she contemplated the sprout. There was a deep desire for eternity and hope projected in that simple gesture of care. However, her gentle expression soon faded. The girl was caught by surprise, abruptly turning her attention to the reality of the conversation. The man in the black coat cut the sentimental moment with pragmatism. He questioned directly about methods to gain experience, focused only on strengthening himself. The question left her momentarily speechless. Her eyes widened, trying to process the abrupt change from a tender moment to such a technical subject. To clarify his goal, he displayed an official document. It was an application for entry to the Academy City Shelter, revealing his next step. The presentation of the form generated immediate shock. Behind him, tension exploded between the girls, who reacted with disbelief at that risky decision. Night fell over the city, but the group's anxiety did not diminish. The discussion continued, focused on the fear that someone would fail the admission test. The group prepared to leave, while the redhead stretched confidently and the green-haired one followed calmly. The blonde stayed behind, paralyzed by fear. She watched her companions' backs receding with apprehension. The insecurity of being the only one who failed consumed her, isolating her from the others. Panic finally overflowed. Trembling and with tears in her eyes, the young blonde was overcome by the terror of the possibility of being alone. The protagonist noticed that she wasn't moving. He stopped beside her, observing the emotional breakdown with his usual analytical coldness. Deciding to resolve the delay practically, he lifted her in his arms as if she were cargo. The sudden action surprised the young green-haired girl, who turned around startled. Suspended in the air, the blonde stopped crying instantly. Her anxiety was replaced by a blush when, unexpectedly, she noticed a pleasant aroma coming from him. The young blonde watched the broadcast with an almost hypnotic fascination, salivating at the expectation of what was to come. The protagonist, however, observed her exaggerated reaction with a mixture of strangeness and disinterest. On the screen, the variety show host enthusiastically announced the main attraction of the night. The famous pop star emerged under the spotlights, greeting the audience and warmly thanking them for the invitation. During the interview, it became clear that the show's format combined casual conversation with tasting delicious dishes. The promise was tempting. Renowned chefs were ready to prepare live any culinary desire of the guest. the host joked about the idol's immaculate image, questioning whether she actually consumed human food or just dew. Amused by the rumor, she denied being a deity and reaffirmed her humanity and her voracious appetite. When thinking about her favorite food, the star's expression lit up with genuine anticipation. As if invoked by the televised desire, reality imitated fiction. Boxes of fried chicken and soda landed on the table. The three girls stared at the food with wide, hungry eyes, completely seduced by the smell. The hot steam emanating from the golden crust made the simple meal something irresistible at that moment. The man in the black coat, however, decided to withdraw, judging the euphoria over the chicken disproportionate, although he recognized the pleasant aroma. The young green-haired girl immediately realized that he intended to leave them alone during dinner. With a flushed face, she broke the silence and insisted that he stay and share the meal with the group. Yoo Ji-tae's communicator rang while he was on the balcony. It was an official call from the academy's admissions office, confirming his identity. The protagonist answered, observing the city. The voice on the other end informed him that an unexpected issue had arisen related to the interview conducted that day. He kept his arm raised, listening attentively to the information coming through the luminous device on his wrist. What was said, however, caused strangeness. Yoo Ji-tae frowned, surprised by the turn the situation had taken. Apparently, the young green-haired girl had made a much bigger impact than expected during her evaluation. The examiners were so impressed with her performance that they decided to offer her the honor of leading the new students' entrance ceremony. Meanwhile, oblivious to the academy's machinations, the girls enjoyed dinner with the simplicity and joy typical of their age. Yoo Ji-tae, however, made an immediate decision. Firmly, he refused the prestigious offer on her behalf, ending the matter. The conversation was suddenly interrupted. The balcony door opened and a red-haired woman stepped outside, invading his space. The protagonist turned around, annoyed by the presence of the stranger, who seemed not to care about his privacy. The woman leaned against the railing with disdain. She openly mocked his posture, ridiculing the fact that he was acting like a father or guardian. With a sharp look and vertical pupils, she analyzed him while smoking, demonstrating an arrogant curiosity about who he really was. Yoo Ji-tae was not shaken by the provocation. He stared back at her coldly, without showing any sign of intimidation. Silence hung between the two on the balcony. The woman seemed determined to confront him, testing the limits of his patience. Yoo Ji-tae reflected on the situation. Even though that place brought together the world's elite, he knew that deep down, everyone there was still just vulnerable children. The girl watched with a penetrating gaze, her red eyes analyzing every movement like those of a predator. With a casual gesture, she flicked the railing, producing a dry sound to attract attention. The protagonist felt the presence right behind him. He turned around, coming face to face with the young red-haired girl who stared at him fearlessly. She cracked her knuckles and smiled confidently, showing that she was ready for a physical confrontation right there. The man, however, only glanced at her sideways. His expression showed pure disinterest and boredom in the face of that provocation. Ena ima ewam exmaki. He decided to ignore her completely and walked away, leaving the girl behind, incredulous at such indifference. Furious at being scorned, she reacted with an obscene gesture, expressing all her childish indignation. Before the situation escalated, the young blonde suddenly appeared, interrupting the redhead's fury by offering her food. Caught off guard, the redhead bit into the piece of chicken, her anger momentarily suspended by confusion. The flavor hit her immediately. The hostility disappeared, giving way to an expression of pure culinary delight. Later, the group came across a colossal structure. It was the academy intended for the training of superhumans and their gifts. That was an elitist environment, frequented by the heirs of directors and royalty, where power dictated the rules. The young women walked across campus, impressed by the magnitude of the school. Despite its reputation for social inequality, the protagonist then revealed that he possessed the financial resources to keep them there, apologizing for concealing his fortune. The revelation brought immediate relief. The young blonde enthusiastically celebrated the fact that everyone had managed to get into the academy. The young blonde's eyes widened, suddenly interested in what she was hearing. The information seemed to have awakened a genuine and intense curiosity in her. The green-haired student continued with the explanation. She detailed how the system worked, questioning whether the other understood the concept of an escort in that context. It was an official and regulated function. The responsibility of these individuals was to escort students to areas of danger, ensuring safety during the journey to the hideout. Furthermore, the guy revealed that there would be more than just escorting. Another test would be required to validate that position. The blonde immediately vibrated with excitement at the prospect of the challenge. The idea of actively participating filled her with an almost uncontrollable energy. However, the euphoria was short-lived. As soon as she understood the real implications or difficulties of the task, her expression collapsed into shock and discouragement. The green-haired girl just smiled nervously. The dramatic and fickle reaction of her interlocutor left her momentarily embarrassed. Their presence in the courtyard did not go unnoticed. Murmurs began to arise around them, with other students speculating about the origin of the newcomers and admiring their appearance. The setting for that commotion was the imposing Gangcheon Pavilion. The massive structure of the Blue Dragon School stood under the sky, ready to host the day's events. Inside the arena, the action was already frenetic. Combatants exchanged quick and aggressive blows, testing their martial skills in fierce duels. The competition was merciless. One of the fighters took advantage of an opening and knocked down his opponent with brute force, decisively ending the confrontation. The entire gymnasium had been transformed into a sectorized battlefield. Multiple duels occurred simultaneously, filling the environment with the sound of impacts and falls. Amidst the chaos and the whispers of the crowd, the protagonist waited, seated. He maintained an impassive and serious posture, standing out from the general agitation of the bleachers. However, he was not alone in his silent observations. A malicious smile appeared in the shadows, suggesting that someone was amused by the violence or planning something dark. The calm of the man in the black coat was suddenly interrupted. An authority figure approached him, questioning his identity and presence in that restricted location. An imposing voice broke the silence. The man in traditional robes introduced himself as Wan, the main teacher of the Blue Dragon School, promptly correcting his breach of etiquette. With a welcoming smile, he expressed how pleased he was to receive the guests. His posture radiated a polite hospitality that masked any other intention. In the bleachers, the atmosphere was one of admiration and comfort. While an older man laughed openly beside him, the protagonist in the black suit remained silent, simply observing the environment. Whispers around them praised the host. The compliments to the host reached his ears, but awakened a sudden state of alert instead of admiration. Something in those words sounds dissonant, instantly sharpening his distrust. The instinct for survival reacts even before reason, converting suspicion into an iron grip. The relaxed posture disappears instantly, giving way to a tension ready to explode into violence. Firm steps break the silence as the challenger ascends to meet her opponent, wielding the wooden sword with determination. Before the still figure awaiting her in the arena, the tension of the moment reveals itself to be, in fact, interesting. With a cold and unwavering gaze, she faces the challenge without showing any sign of fear. The tension in the air solidifies, as her posture exudes a dangerous confidence before the confrontation. With the weapon resting casually, she exudes an overwhelming pressure that seems to make the very air vibrate around her. Her posture radiates the unwavering arrogance of someone who sees not an opponent before her, but just another obstacle about to be toppled. Today, freeze.